Wonderbar. Okay, all right, let's go. Consulting back to basics. This is obviously a topic that is a little bit of common sense. However, we found in the field that common sense isn't always that common. And although we're professionals doing a zillion things all the time during our daily lives, sometimes it's possible to forget some of the basics. So I'm hoping that we can quickly just run through some of those good practices as consultants to help just have better outcomes for ourselves and for our customers and have our coworkers not want to rip our heads off. So, quick agenda here, quick introduction of myself and the point of this presentation beyond what I just said. We'll talk about some of the foundations of professional services consulting, talk about some of the core skills, and then just wrap it up and bring it all together. But first, introductions. My name, Michael Schuster. We are 2026 and every presentation requires AI slop, so that is me as a Labubu. Thank you very much. Midjourney, or was it ChatGPT? I forget. Anyways, so a little bit myself. I'm the founder of Ferroque Systems. We are professional services and as well as obviously a product reseller of VAR out of Toronto, Canada, with offices in the US as well. We cover North America and a select few customers elsewhere around the world. We are focused on end user computing and security, but we're very much from our lineage a services first organization, which makes us a little less transactional than some of the other VARs in our space. So I've been in the field for about 25 years or so now. I'm a consulting veteran. I've been doing this as a professional services consultant for most of my career at this point. I have also authored a number of prolific, well, I guess I've been a bit of a prolific blogger over the course of my career, but I've got a great team. Ferroque is now about 40, 50 people now that are continually putting out content, so less of that burden's been on me, but I have personally authored some documentation for Citrix that's live on TechZone. Also, our team has contributed to some of Microsoft's leading practices, such as their Citrix and Azure landing zone, so on and so forth. What else is there to say? We have handled customers and designed and supported customers as large as 300,000 users, including some of the US's largest healthcare organizations. And we have supported customers across all major industries with very strange and interesting use cases, head-scratching ones at times. Outside of work, I really don't do anything. I'm a workaholic. This is my life. My career is my identity. I'm just kidding. I do have all sorts of interesting, obscure tastes and interests, but that's not really why we're here for. So let's talk about the foundations and why consulting skills matter. So consulting in and of itself is the practice of helping clients solve their problems, allowing them to have informed decisions and achieve better outcomes by applying expertise, communication, and structured guidance. That's really the technical term of what consulting is, no matter the context you want to put it on. Consultants and engineers are distinct roles. Consultants and, sysadmins and engineering roles, they tend to be almost nearly technical and focused in most environments. Professional services consulting, on the other hand, do have a strong technical counterpart to them. I mean, it's still about 60 to 70%, depending on the technology that you're working with, but they've got a distinct soft skills component that makes or breaks the ability to deliver a quality outcome for a customer. So consultants are typically viewed as domain experts in their field. They automatically are supposed to have credibility. We'll get back to that a little bit later, but that can be easily shattered. And as an example of that, many, many moons ago, I was an IT instructor and someone asked me an obscure question about VMware, and with too much confidence, I said, it works like this. And then in front of the entire class, someone pointed out, well, no, it works like this. Look, can't you see? So what do you think that did to my credibility in that moment? Probably went down the toilet pretty fast. And once you start losing credibility, it's a bit of an uphill battle to try and build that back up. So it is something is. When you're at a new customer, usually you're going to start with about 100% confidence when you're walking in as far as their perception of you, and it's just yours to lose from there. Other times, customers might be more skeptical. They might be a little PO'd that you've been brought into their domain and whatnot. Maybe you start out with about 50% credibility walking in and confidence in you. And it can go either way at that point. But the point is, you really want to make sure that as a domain expert, you're maintaining your credibility and operating in a credible fashion. We'll talk about a little more of that later. Professional consultants are not meant to be a cog in a customer's machine. If you've been hired as a full-time employee at an organization or brought in as a contractor to do staff augmentation, then at that point, you're really a cog in their machine. They've already got the mandates, they've already got the processes, you're just there to help with work output. Whereas professional services consultants are they're primarily for an advisory role in many cases. You're there to bring in best practices, provide guidance and field experience, lessons learned, so on and so forth. And many times, especially with large customers, I've gone to a number of large customers personally throughout my earlier career where I learned more from them than I gave them. Happens sometimes. But sometimes the customers you'll run into are domain experts themselves, but they still want to bring in consultants now and then because they want to leverage your field expertise across new things that are happening in a given product and your experience working with other customers in the same field or other fields. So there's even reasons why they're going to bring you in, even though they've got a rock star team themselves. Good consulting acumen, not just technical skill, but the methodology in ways that you consistently deliver a project is the difference between a mediocre consultant and a really good one. Again, back to my personal experience, I worked in a number of consulting organizations over the course of my career where certain people were deemed rock stars by the consulting managers. And it wasn't because they were following a standard methodology that the company had, a certain way of delivering a project, standardized deliverables going to a customer other than maybe just a branded first page or something like that. It was because those people themselves took it upon themselves to develop a methodology of their own for how they would deliver an infrastructure assessment or a VMware design or Exchange design or assessment, that type of thing. And that's something that should be democratized and standardized at the organization level. And that's what makes a consulting organization better than other consulting organizations in my experience. So this is not a comprehensive list, but we're going to talk about some highlights here. And these are really on the soft skill side. It starts with experience, yes. You've got real-world experience, not just in the technology, but dealing with various clients, different client dynamics, and different political situations. And that just honestly comes from experience, just dealing with the multitude of different clients of multiple sizes, different industries. But that shows very quickly. I think we've all heard or probably experienced the stories of a consultancy, not going to name any names, says we're going to give you these expert consultants. They've got years of experience. And then what shows up is a 21-year-old that's fresh out of college that had 6 weeks of training. And that's going to tell you how to configure product X or how to increase revenues and lower expenses. Who's had that experience before? It's a common trope, but it's a reality. And it's unfair to that consultant because they've really been set up to fail, but it is what it is and it happens. We don't want to operate like that. Another key thing is operating with no ego, but being confident. And in the world of IT, that is an incredibly thin line. It's important to walk in whether you're an engineer or a consultant or a sysadmin, to have a level of confidence, but when it borderlines on arrogance, it can create a problem for you. And there's a fine line with perception as well, because certain personalities of customers that you deal with might be a bit more sensitive. And I'll give you an example of this, and it's important just to maintain situational awareness, because there was a customer I was dealing with many years ago who made the fatal mistake of sharing their entire screen. And I guess when they gave a response to something, I was maybe perhaps a little too, maybe I shut down that response a bit too hard and didn't realize it. And someone IM'd them immediately, which popped up on the screen for everyone to see. Geez, this guy's really arrogant. So yeah, it was a bit embarrassing, but at the same time, it's important to maintain a sense of awareness about how you might be perceived by others and appreciating that different personalities might have a lower or higher tolerance for what they might perceive as arrogance or just simply come across as confidence in your statements, how you're delivering your work, or your opinions. Preparation. This is a huge one for me personally. Effective consultants do their homework before their engagements. They don't show up on day one and just hope for the best. They've generally spent at least a day or so beforehand going through the scope of work. They've reassessed their checklist for how they're delivering the project. They've gone through the agenda. They've familiarized themselves with any of the key stakeholders and things to be aware of from the account team that sold the project. And they've gone through any past deliverables. They've hopefully done a bit of research on the company, so they're walking in with a bit of informed understanding of who the customer is and what the outcomes are expected to be. Attention to detail. Good consultants meticulously detail and document everything they're doing for clarity, but also accountability. I can't tell you how important it is to document everything. In the land of AI chatbots now that are in your meetings, incredibly helpful. But we found it increasingly important, especially when dealing with large customers, multiple teams or whatnot, to document decisions, agreements, and what have you, send them out, because some point down the line, it may be next week, it could be 4 months from now, someone may come back and say, oh, we didn't agree to that, or why did we do this, or this is not what we talked about. At least you got a paper trail for it. It's saved our consultants, as well as my friends and colleagues in other consulting firms, more than once. It just really, really pays to matter. And adaptability is another big one. When you're consulting with different companies in different industries, you're going to deal with a lot of different egos, politics, and even multiple customers at the same time. And consultants that tailor their approach to changing client needs, providing that flexibility to adjust strategies and approaches in responses to circumstances, is really, really important, as well as knowing when to push. Especially on projects, we've always got mandates to hit, goals and milestones to reach, and finite amounts of time, and understanding when to push and when not to push back, and who to push with, because maybe it's not the direct person or the customer side you need to deal with, it's a stakeholder that needs to be brought into the equation, will help move things forward, or if you approach the wrong person, could fire back on you. So it's getting that sixth sense of how to deal and move through conflict to get points across and get issues escalated. And on that note as well, navigating difficult personalities does come up a fair bit. That's just a reality. Is anyone, who here actually is a consultant right now? Anyone? Okay. Has any of you not dealt with difficult personalities before at a customer site? No? Yeah, okay, yeah. The sooner you can make those people your friends, the better off you are, because those folks, if you can identify them from the outset, if you get them on your side, your life will be a heck of a lot easier. It can be difficult to do. It can be a simple coffee. It can be simple of spending a bit more time with them or ingratiating yourselves to them, being a bit more differential. It can go a long way from that person being a roadblock and making your life a living hell for the rest of the project. Happened more than once. Quality communication. Being clear and consistent in your communication is vital to aligning expectations and keeping things aligned. Being polite and professional, but also personable, is key to developing rapport with your customers. The more rapport you develop, the faster things move, the less roadblocks you are going to see. Critical thinking. Critical is obviously critical. Having the ability to see the big picture and develop long-term strategies that align with client goals and second and third order thinking is really important. If you're talking about a design decision or a configuration matter or some other business challenge, not just saying, great, well, we're going to configure it this way and not considering what the downstream impacts might be, or hey, we're going to change the layout page for a given landing zone for the user, we're going to change the URL, and not thinking about how that's going to get communicated out to people, just as an example, to ensure that the support desk doesn't get set on fire 5 days from now. Those simple things are really critical. Client empathy. This goes a long way too, going back to those interpersonal skills that we were talking about. Having a commitment to understanding them and prioritizing their needs and some of their challenges or their concerns goes a long way. And reliability. Being able to consistently follow up in communication, including takeaways, builds trust and credibility. If you're not sure about something, if a customer asks you a question and you're not sure 100% of the answer with full confidence, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm not sure about that, but I'll get back to you. But you make darn sure that you get back to them, because if you don't, credibility goes down. All right, and lastly, continuous learning. I can't stress this enough. If you're in the field, continually staying up to date on the technologies as well as soft skill development is really important to keep your skills honed and as well as keeping you relevant. And at the end of the day, that's what a lot of customers are paying for. Notes and tools, again, this has been a lot easier the last few years. If you've got AI agents that can help automate the collection of data when you are holding meetings, especially the conferences or whatnot, super helpful and saves you having to have a secondary resource to be taking notes, or you splitting your time between listening to a customer and writing things down. Anything I've missed here? Anyone have any feedback, their thoughts on what makes a good consultant that might not be on this list? Own your mistakes. Yes, have accountability. That is huge. That really should be on here. That also negatively impacts credibility if you can't do that. We're all human at the end of the day. All right, speaking of that, questions. So let's see your first one. Again, we talked about this before. Customers hire consultants to solve problems and to give advisory capabilities on a given technology topic or what have you. So it's important to seek context versus just blindly sending out recommendations and saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You want to make sure that as you're working through whatever your engagement is with a customer, that you're asking enough contextual questions to understand what their outcome is and why they want things a certain way. If you've got a customer that has a use case for, I don't know, let's just say a GPU-powered use case, you're going to, let's say, for example, you're going to want to understand who those users are, how they work, what the type of applications they are, what type of load they are. You want to create enough context around the outcomes that the customer is looking for, because you'll find little tidbits of things that will show up there that might affect other configuration considerations that you need to address and accommodate for. Otherwise, as you get into a deployment, for example, something is going to blow up. Or if this was an assessment and you guided them down the wrong path because you didn't ask them why something was configured a certain way, only to find out that there was a key reason to do that, you have probably shot yourself in the foot. So context is key. Consultants also need to be able to translate business requirements to technical requirements. And this is something that I found engineers and sysadmins can struggle with initially until they get more comfortable with this. But we spend so much of our time working deep in technology stacks. Sometimes if someone asks us, hey, what does AVD do? What does Windows 365 do? What does Liquidware do? You might not immediately be able to give them a snap action from a business outcome perspective. You're probably going to go to a technical response, right? So being able to but that also plays an important role when we talk about solutioning for customers in particular. You need to take their business outcomes, what they're trying to do with a given platform, and translate that into technical requirements. And it takes a little bit of effort, but that's where the solutions architecture hat comes in as we work through with customers. Up next, avoid telling a customer their baby is ugly. So, who knows Ron Oglesby? I love Ron. So Ron's got a great story. I've spent a lot of my career working within the Citrix Consulting org, which is frankly one of the, bar none before it got largely dismantled, one of the most fine-tuned consulting orgs from a methodology perspective I'd ever dealt with. There's a gentleman there named Rob Zalewski. Rob was originally from Unidesk and a few other places. He mentored Ron at another organization. He had a great story that just accentuates that point. So, Buddy walks in, and this is an exchange assessment, and was looking at their architecture and goes, shit, that's a single point of failure. Who the hell designed this? None of this makes sense. If this goes down, this entire platform is down. If you walk into a customer and say that, depending on the customer, they're not going to be too thrilled about that, right? It's a little too direct. A better way of doing it, although it takes a little bit more effort, is to ask qualifying questions. You walk through, in that example, you walk through their Exchange architecture. Now, who the heck is architecting Exchange anymore, to be honest? But there's always those edge use cases where that's still a thing. Anyways, walking through and saying, great, I noticed that this area is configured this way, or there's a single server here. What happens if this link fails over here? Is there a redundant link, Mr. and Mrs. Customer? Or if that server goes down, what is the impact to the rest of the environment? Using questioning like that will allow them to come to the conclusion that their deployment sucks without you having to tell them it sucks. And there's a big difference there, especially for folks that might be a little bit more sensitive, or if there's someone in the room that designed that platform and now they're embarrassed or pissed off at you. So there's a way to point something out while not owning 100% of the essentially the blame there of creating a negative connotation. Summarizing, confirming understanding verbally via email. I mentioned that before. It's a real CYA. And just a quick British relation thing. We've all seen this diagram before, right? Various connotations, expectation management, this and that, and whatever. It originally came from the 1970s from the University of London. This was the original drawing I found. So just so happened that I can bring that up here in London. So cool. Love coincidences. Communicating. So a lot of this is going to be common sense, or frankly, to be honest, some of these here I will fully admit are utterly anal. But these are tiny details in some of these next slides that create key signals that give positive impressions of being organized. And The first one is going to be setting meeting agendas with defined prerequisites and internal touch points. So if you're starting out with a project, ensuring that you're sending out for your kickoff a meeting agenda, but whenever you're setting your meetings, the various items that you're going to be discussing there, the people that should be showing up, especially if you're doing a project that has domain expertise required on the customer side, from the desktop team, the security team, the network team, so on and so forth. Ask for those people to be present right up front, because what happens when you don't, you get into that meeting. Someone's not there, you're waiting to pull someone in, you're postponing the meeting, you've just derailed things because you didn't let people know up front that a particular piece of domain expertise requirement was needed. Better to plan for that. Internal touch points. So generally within our consulting org, whenever we kick off a new project, one of the first things that the consultant has to do is make sure that they schedule repeating internal touch points with the internal team so that everyone is kept up to date with what's going on internally at the customer side. And this is in additional to the external touch points that we want to have with the customers to go over status and all that good stuff to keep everyone aligned and on point. And I'm not sure why that is, oh, I just realized this. I'm using a special font here and something's being covered up. And I can't move that. So I'm sorry that some of the text is covered. My bad. So yeah, anyways, meeting details and time zones. Again, really anal. If you're dealing with organizations across multiple time zones, make sure that when you're setting your meetings that you're setting them appropriately. You've got the title properly indicated, not, I don't know, the Azure migration meeting, right? Surely it's broader than that and there's a specific topic, right? Be detailed in your titles. Make sure your audience is correct. Make sure your agenda's there with people that are necessary, that should be in that meeting, even not by name, but by domain area. Really important. Knowing how to handle challenging questions and matching communication mediums to the urgency. So matching communications with urgency. This is a fairly important one. So we usually deal with it through the course of our work: phone calls, IM, Teams and Slack, and email. But each one of those conveys a certain amount of urgency to it. If you need to pick up a phone, you're really doing that for the fastest, most real-time or urgent communication issues or blocking problems. If you have just inadvertently taken a customer's environment down, you're not sending an email. You're calling someone. Maybe you're sending an email as well, but you're absolutely calling them, because email has got the lowest perception of urgencies. Use it for non-urgent stuff, documenting communication. It is not for something that needs immediate action. Like an IM notification, it's a bit quicker, semi-urgent, timely, but not immediate responses, really. If someone IMs me, there's unlikely I'm going to get back to them right away. It just is what it is. It's not, that's at least for me, but it's not usually interpreted as urgent. But if you're going to be doing a kickoff meeting with a customer and you are going to be 10 minutes late and it starts in 5 minutes, you probably want to call the main stakeholder as well as send an email or whatnot to make sure that you let them know. Otherwise, again, it's a perception management thing. You don't want people waiting on the bridge for 10 minutes not knowing what's going on because no one happened to check their email yet or something like that. So yeah. Maintaining, actually no, we'll talk about this one first. Avoiding speaking in absolutes. So that can come back and bite you in the tail. Some of us tend to be very flowery in our language or very passionate, and that's okay. But saying things like, we never configure this that way, or no one does this, or you always need to do that, more often than not is always BS, because there's always situations where maybe that's the case. So avoiding speaking in absolutes is fairly important, because it's more of a CYA thing, once again, a cover your ass, because someone could poke at that later on and say, well, we did this because you told us to always do it that way. And maybe there was a particular consideration that they needed to do it a different way, but they didn't do it because you said always. So again, CYA. Documenting with decisions with rationales. So this goes back to CYA, as well as just making sure that, especially in large organizations, when people may be moving in and out of teams, when you are, let's say, doing a design doc, or have done an assessment and you've defined risks and whatnot and ways to remediate something, but especially with designs. If you made a decision on something, you want to make sure you document why the decision was made, as well as the alternatives are also good. But doing this versus just saying, we're designing it this way, or we're doing this. And you want to do that for every decision, but all the core design decisions that really drive most of the outcomes. It's really important to be that detailed, because I guarantee you someone at some point will pick it up and go, well, this other random use case has come up, or we've changed this thing over here. Now we don't know why we've designed it this way because we don't have the context. So just having context to these types of things, quite important. Maintaining a professional tone in all contacts. This is not just for standard professionalism. This is also for CYA. I've unfortunately been aware of situations, not with me personally, thankfully, of situations where a colleague was a little too comfortable with the customer that he was dealing with, and they were a little bit more crass in their language or whatnot over time. And then, although the person they were dealing with on a regular basis was fine with it because that's how he talked to him, a manager heard it and then reported it back to the leadership of the consulting organization, and he was removed from the project. So unfortunately, those things happen, so it's better to err on the side of caution, because it's not just your reputation on the line, it's that of whomever you're working for. So it's just something to be aware of. So maintaining a professional tone at all times, key. Timely and responsive communications, we talked about that, and status reports. Especially if you're doing part-time projects, status reports, whether it's email or written, on a consistent basis, not only keeps you accountable to be showing what we've done today, what our roadblocks are, what we're focusing on next, and what have you, keeps the customer accountable for what they have to do, and also provides an easy way for you to run off and start the next day or the next week or whatever with knowing what you need to focus on next. Okay, managing expectations. If you're leading projects, you're probably handling the PM roles as well in many cases. If you are a large project, maybe you've got a designated PM on your side and the customer side, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. You are often responsible for driving engagements forward, identifying and overcoming the roadblocks, and escalating issues that impede progress or create risks of any kind. And you play a central role in managing the expectations to the customer as a result of that. Customers, often their PMs, have an unrealistic set of demands at times, and that can be uncomfortable. Let's be honest about that. You need to be willing to tactfully push back by facts, of course, not in the scope, not in the scope, timeline, acceleration, and risks and whatnot, but these are just things that we have to be cognizant of. Scope misalignment to stakeholder expectations, SOWs versus expected outcomes. Kickoffs are important, and ensuring that when you do a kickoff on a new project, you go over the scope, because sometimes the people that are the stakeholders that are actively in that meeting may not be the people that signed off on the statement of work. And there's nothing worse than getting halfway through a project only to realize that you've been approaching one set of objectives when the team that are actually paying for it, that for some reason, I don't know why they weren't involved in writing the scope, we're expecting a completely different set. So making sure there's alignment out of the gate so you can adjust will save a lot of wasted time and a lot of animosity, if you will. And this brings us to the topic of stakeholders. Why are stakeholders important? Stakeholders are the ones generally that have agreed to pay you, because you need to know who to please and who to deliver for. So identifying who you're going to be working with on your projects is one thing, but identifying who is the stakeholder on the projects in the customer side is something a little altogether different, and they may not be the same people. Scope creep. So we will often end up in situations where there's new use cases that you find during the course of your project, new requirements, or there's a job in the project that the customer didn't account for. Maybe it's building the Azure landing zone, or building SQL, or Microsoft CA services, or something else of that nature. And sometimes they're going to start looking at you to say, hey, well, you can take this on, and maybe even try and twist your arm to say that somehow it's in the scope when everyone knows it's really not. And that's classic scope creep. And your engagement has a finite amount of time and effort within it to be working on that. And this is where developing an understanding and use of the soft no comes in. And that's a difference between a hard no and just outright denying something, which again is going to create friction, create animosity. And a soft no means declining or deferring a request while preserving the relationship and keeping momentum, and acknowledging the request and showing that you understand the value of what they're asking for, but re-anchoring the scope of the engagement against what has actually been agreed to in writing and signed off on. Now, there is times where perhaps the scope creep is actually something that has to happen because the project is fully derailed. There was a new requirement or a new restriction that came in that now constrains the project, and unless you change course, causes issues. Then you need to go through your change management discussions. Maybe it's a $0 change because the time effort is still the same, but you need to rewrite the new set of outcomes, or maybe it's an increase of scope, and that's fair. But being above board on that is important. But offer a path forward instead of just a hard rejection. And that could be a change order to scan the scope. It could be de-scoping something else, or agreeing to revisit on a best effort once the core requirements have been set. Documentation basics. So, documentation is the hallmark of quality delivery. And this is something that we've come across quite a bit before. The unfortunate aspect is that not all consultancies do a really great job of this. We've worked with a number of consultancies in our industry who are incredible consultants, but they barely do any documentation. And the documentation really is the thing that remains with your customer after you've gone and left. And even, who's ever written lots of large design documents, 80, 100 pages or whatnot? Your magnum opuses, you're glad when they're over, they're beautiful documents, but you also just know that almost no one's gonna read them. Hopefully they do, but in reality, that'll be the document that 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, can save your tail. We've actually had the odd customer who had a full change in management at one point, and then found one of our documents from 5 years ago. And that's how we got a call back to come back, because they said, well, you guys seem to know what you're doing because this is a really well-produced document, followed a really clear structure, was correctly formatted and whatnot. You seem to know what you're doing and seem to have a good methodology. Please come and help us back in. So those documents pay dividends, not just being a written agreement with how we've done a certain thing, right? Developing and using templates and not reusing prior deliverables. So this is a very important thing. Although it's a pain in the rear end to maintain. But good consultancies will have standardized documentation templates, standardized formatting within them, and what have you, and they're updated on a periodic basis. And personally, for us, we've got documents not just for statements of work, but we've got templates for our status reports, our risk memos, our designs, our assessments, so on and so forth. We've got standard templates for most of our deliverables across various technologies that allows us to deliver consistently and make sure that we are just providing a good quality outcome to our customers on a consistent basis, and also not expecting our consultants to reinvent the wheel whenever they are working with a new customer. But don't reuse prior deliverables. I can't stress that enough. You never want to end up in a situation where you're reusing something only to leave in a few things in there that are not relevant to the customer at all, and they read it and they catch that, because there will always be those customers that do read your documentation, which is what you want, but then go, hey, this is talking about a use case that isn't even in our environment. Where the heck did this come from? Did you copy and paste this from somewhere else? Or why the heck is there someone else's customer name in here? Which I've seen that in statements of work, I've seen that in documentation. It is super dangerous. It is one thing, if you really want to go the extra level, there's a lot of information in your documentation that you're repeating frequently, then find a way to standardize that and then have an area underneath where you go into a bit more context. And that's the happy medium, and your template always has some general information in it to get you going. But copy and pasting, not a good idea, especially not in customer deliverables, because we've seen instances where customers, the consultant goes, oh, well, I'm just gonna replace customer name X with customer name Y, except somewhere else in the document, customer name Y was spelt out, maybe the acronym was fully spelt out. Or there was a slight typo in the name, so it didn't get caught in the find replace. Sometimes that doesn't even, that will even get caught in not even get caught in our QA process, right? So avoid that at all costs, it's just trouble. Clear and consistent formatting and grammar. So that's fairly obvious, and there's really no excuse at this point in time. If you are unsure about your wording of something, or if it's clear, concise, that's why we've got AI tools, provided you're not putting customer-sensitive information in there. Using ChatGPT or something to help you rewrite a sentence for clarity is quite valuable, and is likely going to help with grammar at the same time. So make use of that. At the same time, simple language, there's no need for academic showboating, especially when we're dealing with organizations that tend to have people that may not have the language you're writing in as their first language. it's very important to use as basic language as possible. You're not going to lose points by using simple language. You're going to gain them from being clear to understand. No one's asking you to speak like Dr. Fraser Crane or Winston Churchill when you're writing your documents. It's just utterly not required. So being simple wins points. Explaining why behind any recommendations. So, especially when you're doing assessments and you're identifying risks or writing a risk memo to a customer, or you're doing a design, you have to identify key risks to the project right up front to the customer. You need to explain why, okay? And I'll use an example. The risk, you've got diarrhea, okay? The impact, you're probably not going to be fun to hang around with while you're in the workplace. The recommendation, maybe work from home for a couple of days, okay? It's a bit crass, but it explains the context very, very clearly. But you want to do this with your risks and recommendations as you define them for your customers, because context is everything. So if you just say, hey, this is a single point of failure, that's insufficient. You need to sort of move up from there and provide a bit more detail. QA. We do a QA within our organization. We've got a peer review that goes through 2 stages of QA, one for management, one for technical. And that has been very, very valuable to us. Not everyone is the same, on the consulting side, has got the same level of written mastery. So having that level of QA, but also to just on the grammar piece and the formatting piece, but also to ensure that the technical solution is sound by having an architect review it, very valuable. Presentation basics. So I'm not going to go through all of this. Take a photo if you'd like, but this is also the most ironic of this entire presentation. Number one, I will say I am not an expert presenter. I am a novice. But one of the first things here is not have text-heavy decks. And what do I have here? Yeah. So there is exceptions to that. There is exceptions, I will say this. If the presentation deck you're creating is going to be the deliverable, then maybe you need to actually have a bit more text in here. But sometimes you can also just leverage having more of the speaker's notes going into more of the detail. But really, whenever you're presenting, you want just enough information on the slide so people get the idea, but they're listening to you and not reading off the deck. Not everyone can do 2 things at the same time. Okay? But some basic things here to go over real quickly. Tailoring your content whenever you're delivering a presentation. Know your audience. You're going to alter how you're going to speak about certain points and risks or whatever the case may be, depending on if you're presenting to a bunch of executives or technologists. So something we have to be aware of, because things can go sideways real quick if you haven't tailored. For some of our larger engagements, we've actually had to do 2 types of presentations. So we have to do them twice. One for audience A, one for audience B. We try and minimize that, but it is a reality sometimes. Practice, setting proper meeting duration. That one's hyper important. It is better to assume you need more time and finish early than assume you're only going to use an hour and then you're 2 hours in and you've lost half the audience. So something to bear in mind. Presenting, making sure all your IT works slow and so forth, yada, 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 this and that. I want to see if there's anything else important in here. Pausing for feedback as you go through is also very important versus racing through, especially when you're dealing with designs or key findings with a customer. You want to stop as you go through to see if everyone's got everything that they need or if there's any real issues. Okay, bringing it together. So there's a number of key takeaways here. But to wrap things up, I want to summarize everything we've talked about into a few key takeaways. First, what makes consultants successful? A lot of people assume that it's primarily technical skill. And yes, technical expertise does matter. But if you're advising customers on complex systems, you obviously need to know what you're doing. But in my experience, technical knowledge alone is not what separates average consultants from great ones. The real differentiators are things like preparation, communication, structured thinking. And preparation means showing up ready, understanding the project scope, knowing the stakeholders, and being ready for the meetings you're about to walk into. When consultants fail, it's often not because they didn't know the technology, it's because they didn't prepare properly for the engagement. Listening is another huge one. Clients hire consultants to solve their problems, and if you're not listening, how the heck are you going to solve their problems? And the first step is understanding the problem correctly. So asking good discovery questions, building that context, interpreting what the customer is really saying, and translating that into the business needs into technical solutions. Communication also critical. Clear communication builds trust, helps set expectations, prevents misunderstandings, and keeps the project on track. And that communication has to be tailored to your audience. The way you talk to a CIO is going to be very different from how you're talking to an administrator or an engineer. Another major success factor is structure and consistency. Good consultants follow a methodology consistently throughout their engagements. They document decisions, they track risks, they confirm the scope up front, and that structure prevents surprises from popping up and derailing the projects later on. And of course, relationships matter. Projects are done by people. Politics, personalities, organizational dynamics, they're always part of the equation, and consultants who succeed are the ones who can navigate through those environments professionally and build strong rapport with their clients. Sometimes you've got to be a bit of a hard ass to certain types of people and a completely different differential person to others in order to get your outcomes. And understanding where to push and when not to is a key thing. Arrogance is probably a bigger one too. We're all in IT, we've all got egos. It's just part of the game, I get it, but it has to be tempered. If a consultant shows up thinking they're the smartest person in the room and they're dismissing the customer's input, the engagement's going to struggle. And then another common mistake is focusing only on the technology. Consulting is not just engineering work, it's solving business problems. Poor communication is going to cause you a lot of issues and erodes trust really, really quickly. Follow up when you are asked to, if you commit to a customer to sort out a question they've asked and get back to them in a timely manner. If you drop the ball on follow-ups, you're going to lose credibility. Lastly, scope management. Over-promising and under-delivering is the fastest way to damage credibility as well. Good consultants are honest about their constraints and manage scope creep carefully. And documentation and time management, also critical. If the decisions aren't documented, the risks aren't tracked, or if communication isn't recorded, things will fall apart. So if there's one thing I want you to remember from this talk is great consulting is not about technical skill. It's about preparation, communication, structure, and critical thinking and trust. And lastly, from that morning session, be mindful of burnout. Consulting, especially when you're dealing with multiple customers, can be some of the most stressful, pressure-inducing jobs out there. You hear about burnout all the time, not even in the technical consulting field, but at the big fives, it's a real thing. There's always more work to be done in 40 hours, and it's rare to actually get through it. So you got to actually make time for yourselves, or else you're not going to be able to perform for your customer, and will have negative impacts on yourself as well. With that, probably went a few minutes over. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, sir.
More of a comment. Your thing there about not using previous. Sorry. Your comment there about reusing documentation. I would also add it's not necessarily just customer name, search, find, and replaced. I have a friend who once wrote a design document and reused it. And then in this customer meeting, they were going, "This is really interesting document, friend of John's. But they're not our IP arrangers, and neither are we British Sugar." And it completely found out. So yeah, absolutely. If there's rule number 1 or rule 0, never duplicate or reuse.
That's a good point. I'd also extend that to diagrams.
Yeah,
that
diagrams,
often gets missed.
IP addresses, just all that, and DNS names, all that kind of good stuff. Like
it's easy to miss that stuff, especially when you're dealing with, let's say, a 100-page document.
Yeah, this friend of mine, this was 20 years ago, just for the record. Thank you.
One other point that's worth mentioning is that one that's taught to me very early on is your documentation and whatever you send out as a deliverable is in your control.
Yep.
So it's worth spending that time and investing in it. And if it does mean it's going to be a day late or you've got to extend it something because you want to get it right, spend the time and get it right, because you might not be in control of the environment, delays and all of that things. That artifact is completely in your control.
And once you've built that environment, if you're not managing it, what else is happening to it once it's gone? And that provides a document, provided that you built to the documentation specs, that is what was agreed to. So if there's been deviations and there's problems down the road, it's easy to be defensible on that. And there was a point in there I probably didn't highlight enough about the importance of having defensible decisions. And that starts with good documentation to rationalize why you've made certain decisions.
There was always a rule I was told as a young consultant that for every £1 you spend or $1 you spend in design will save you £10 or $10 in implementation.
That's
so
very
if you
true.
have great, good documentation, it's how do you turn up almost, isn't it? It's like you invest in that will save you money because you're having to think about it.
It's to borrow from the tailoring industry, measure twice, cut once.
Awesome. If there's no more questions, then thank you, sir.
Oh, Colin, one more.
Yep.
And I owe this to him because I peppered him with questions,
okay.
and I loved your topic, so I'm so sorry if I derailed anything.
Questions is interest, in my opinion. So that's no. You said managing business requirements, managing security requirements is something that's really. Security first is of course right, but especially in larger organizations, we're confronted with people from security teams that are just irrational, right? And that's a polite word. It is really
Let me ask you this: who's dealt with a totally rational security architect within a customer environment?
Do you think they slug us off for security?
Yeah, they're in their own security forum, slugging off EUC.
Yeah. Usually more fur associated with them, but. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're always going to deal with those people. They're always there. Depending on the personality of that person, you might need to skip a level and go to someone that's going to be a bit more rational. It might even be their manager. The reality is sometimes the security specialists, as long as you can show them and document why what you're proposing is technically sound and how you've got compensating controls for whatever risk they think is a problem, you're generally good. If there is a real risk that you can't design for, then, pardon me, they may have a point. But if things still have to move forward, you have to solution around it. But in many cases, I deal with, even now, I don't do as much in the field consulting as I used to. But even now, there are certain accounts that I get involved in that have some real interesting security personalities where they'll pick on anything and raise it as just the smallest thing. I moved this pen. Well, no, that's a huge problem. It has to go to the architecture review board, this and that. We have to do a full security assessment. It's like, all you've done is just do this. There was no security implication. It was like changing an IP address within an existing range type of thing. Those times you generally need to generally at that point, on the customer side, that is a known personality. Most sane, sensible customers know that person is in there and they can be a bit challenging to deal with. You need to build rapport with those other people on that side to essentially maneuver around that person or get them, put pressure on them to comply and get things moving. At the end of the day, you do want to have a bit of empathy for them because these are the folks that security falls on them in many cases, and they're the ones that are up at night with tremendous anxiety about what if this gets breached, what if that happens, what if this happens. They probably deal with more stress in the field of technology than most technologists do. So I get that they can be very irrational, like to say no to absolutely everything, but the reality is that impedes business outcomes moving forward. So sometimes it's just about bringing them back down to the ground, getting them to touch grass, and if that doesn't work because they're just a total pain in the rear end, you have to hop up a level or two to get pressure to put on them, either from the side or from above down.
Awesome.
There's no magic bullet. Buying them a beer may not do it.
We do have a roundtable this afternoon, which obviously our presenters will be at, so if you've got any further comments, questions, chatting, bring them to our roundtable. We do have a coffee break now, and then we'll be back in here in 25 minutes for the last session of the day, roundtable. Remember, there's a prize draw for the feedback form, so make sure you are filling those in on the app as well. It's all in here.
Set up in the UK.